So I'm joined this morning by Merv Thomas from CSW, Christian Solidarity Worldwide, and our Trinity rep, Daryl. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning, Liz.
Merv, can you tell us a bit about your role and just a little bit about the work CSW does? Some of us have known about it for a long time. Some people in church don't know as much.
Okay, well, my personal role is I've been everything in CSW because I was one of the founders of CSW in 1979, and I chaired the board for many years. Then I was CEO for many years, and recently I've become they're sort of half putting me out to grass, and I'm the they call me the founder president, but basically I do all of the external work. So I do a lot of advocacy work in Parliament and at the EU and on Capitol Hill, and advocacy targets around the world. I work with major donors to fund the organisation. And I do lots of things like this, speaking to our wonderful supporting churches. And CSW basically is a religious freedom charity. We're an advocacy organisation, so we don't get involved with aid or any of those things. Any of the what you might call practical things, but we like to think being a voice for the voiceless is very practical. So yeah, we're a voice in all of those areas for Christians, but also for people of other faiths.
Yeah, so that's quite interesting, isn't it? You know, CSW supports all faiths and the freedom to practice those beliefs. Was that the original aim, or was there something that changed from the original?
No. Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because no, the answer is when we started in 1979, we started in response to Christians being in prison in the old Soviet Union. And, you know, cast your mind back to those days of the, and I think you're both old enough to just about cast your mind back to those days. But I certainly can. But you know, there was lots of persecution of Christians in Eastern Europe, and that was what we responded to. And but then, of course, 10 years later, in 1989, communism fell all over Europe, and the whole landscape changed. And no longer were Christians persecuted. And although things actually sadly are going backwards a bit in some of those countries now, but so we had to make a decision. Actually, was there any other persecution in the world? We only knew about Eastern Europe, and of course, when we looked around, we saw there was an awful lot more that we didn't know about. And so we. And it was then, as we were one of the countries we started working on was Burma, and as we were working on Burma, we were working. There was 4 groups of Christian ethnic groups, and the Karen and the Karenni, the Chin and the Kachin, and but suddenly we found out, and this was 20 years ago, we saw this group called the Rohingya Muslims, and we were faced with the decision. Well. What do we do? You know, we're speaking up for the Christian groups, but this group are just as persecuted. But we are Christians. What should we do? Of course, actually, it's a no-brainer. I hope that, you know, if a Muslim and a Christian walked into your church hungry, you wouldn't just feed the Christian. And so yeah, we decided that yes, we needed to speak out for people of all faiths. But of course, the church actually 20 years ago wasn't quite ready for that, and we didn't. It's only been in the last 6 or 7 years that we've really begun to make sure that everybody, and churches like yourselves, individual Christians that support us, understand the theology about this. You know, the Bible talks about looking after the Leviticus talks about the foreigner and the alien, and Proverbs 31, it says we're to speak up for those unable to speak for themselves. It doesn't say just speak up for God's covenant people. And then, of course, the story that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan is the great example of helping those that they're not the same as us. So now we do. Yes, we speak out for people of all faiths and none, actually, because there are atheists that are executed even in places like Bangladesh. So that's what we do.
So that's sort of, in a sense, how it's expanded from the first vision. Are there any particular areas you're looking to move into at the moment? Any particular parts of the world?
Well, I don't think there's necessarily any. We've got enough to do with the ones that we've got, and in fact, we are not. We're quite a small. We are quite a small organisation. We only employ about 50 people around the world, and we focus on between 25 and 30 countries, and we could focus on treble that amount, actually. There are a number of countries that we just keep an eye on, but no, what the future holds, if you like, is to a degree more of the same. But we've moved from campaign. In those early days, we campaigned for individuals in prison in Russia and Romania, and we had their names, and we knew how they were in prison for, and we got people to pray, we got people to write letters to their MPs and all this kind of stuff until they were released. And then we got wonderful, this was a great news, somebody was released. We still do that, but we've moved much more to preventative. So we've moved, if you like, that if you have the picture of people walking off the edge of a cliff, and there's two responses to that. One is you can hire an ambulance and pick them up at the bottom and take them to hospital if they're still alive, or the other one is to put a fence at the top. And so we've moved, if you like, from the first aid, the ambulances, to the fence at the top. And what we now much more campaign for countries to respect religious freedom as a whole. So working in that whole political area. And I have to say, Liz, there's more awareness at a political level of this whole subject of religious freedom around the world than there has ever been in my time. And I've been doing it, as I say, for 40 odd years. Yeah. I mean, we've now got in this country our own special envoy for freedom of religion or belief, a Christian MP called Fiona Bruce. America have really pushed on with this. Many countries have got their own envoy. And in fact, even last week, and this is hot off the press for you, just last week, I met with the Prime Minister to talk about this issue. And really? That would never have happened 40 years ago. We had a job to get even some MPs interested. Now there are over 120, I think, MPs who are members of the all-party parliamentary group on freedom of religion or belief. So we've really moved it up the agenda. We've now got to push further so we can really make a difference on the ground.
Brilliant. And how's COVID affected it all? Because obviously that's had a global impact. How's it affected the work of CSW?
Yeah, it hasn't affected it's meant that we haven't been able to travel, which is, I hate that. In some respects, it's brought us closer in that we've been able to do these Zoom meetings, which, if you're anything like me, you're fed up with, when you're going from one to the other the whole day long and into the evening because you're doing America and all of this kind of stuff. But but in some ways it's brought us closer because it's been easier to have meetings, particularly with advocacy targets and politicians around the world. But in other ways, it's you can't be part of our work. What we call our solidarity work is going to somewhere like Nigeria, where they've had a massacre, where you go to a village where they're frightened, to go there, to put your arms around them and pray with them. They don't see anybody. They think the world, very often, I'm told, when you go into those villages in Nigeria or anywhere where they've suffered so badly, they say, we thought the Christian church had forgotten us. And that's a terrible thing to say. So that being able to go and put your arm around them and cry with them and pray with them is something that we haven't been able to do. And that's really a big miss. But we hopefully won't be too long before we'll get back to that. But the way our persecuted minorities around the world have fared in COVID has not been good either, because they have been, many governments have used COVID as an excuse to repress Christians even more, and other minorities. In India, for example, Muslims are accused of being spreaders of the virus, and you know, and Christians in Pakistan have been denied state aid, which had gone to other people in the COVID crisis. So, but generally speaking, things like lockdowns, you know, we finding this really hard, don't we? We hate, well, I do, hate lockdown, and but you know, for our Christian brothers and sisters and others around the world, in many respects, this is normal life. Restrictions like this is the norm, and so yeah, it's had all kinds of effects, but we have been able to carry on our work without any shadow of doubt.
Yeah. So just moving over to Trinity, I know, you know, you mentioned how we used to get involved with things in a slightly different way. I can remember writing Christmas cards, for example, to people in prison, and that was something we did to support CSW. Daryl, at the moment, what are we doing in Trinity to support? How are we encouraging people to get involved?
So basically what we'll be looking at is that, you know, there's multiple ways for people to get involved. You know, there's prayers, you know, CSW issue a prayer diary, which will support that. You know, there's numerous reports that can be shared. They give it a really big outline on some of the issues. You know, there's a report there on the moment about the Middle East, and how not just Christian faiths, but all faiths are suffering in the Middle East from how countries are taking their decisions on faith forward. So, you know, if anyone wants to pick up with me, I'm more than happy to point them at areas on the website, obviously, or to talk through some of the things that are happening.
Yeah, we do put out links through our sort of updates sometimes to the website.
Brilliant.
Things that are going on, campaigns and things. And
yeah, can I say, Liz, I mean, that is really, really important to us. When we go into Parliament, you know, we're more likely to get a response if an MP has had a dozen letters from his constituents or her constituents, and we make it very easy on our website for people to be able to email their MPs, and you know, time and again they tell us, oh yeah, we're taking this up because we've had and even ministers will say, well, you know, we need some sort of authorization almost to move, and if we've got people pushing us from the ground, we're going to respond to this. So, you know, really, really important. You play, everybody in Trinity plays your part as much as we do, because we need you behind us.
Brilliant. So, Merv, how's your faith helped you in, as you sort of looked at these really tricky issues across the world, and the injustice you've seen? How's your faith helped you with that?
Well, I couldn't have done it without. I think one of the questions I'm often asked, which is kind of in answer to this, one of the questions I'm often asked is, how do you cope with hearing these stories? And, you know, I've got on my phone, I wouldn't show you, but I've got all kinds of most horrendous stuff. I'm on a WhatsApp group with 200 pastors in northern Nigeria, and every week almost I get posted pictures, videos of beheadings, of the most horrible things going on in the world, and how do you cope with that? You know, for 40 years I've been hearing these stories, seeing these images, but the answer is, the third thing is not just seeing the images and hearing the stories, but is meeting the people. When you meet the people, it strengthens your faith so much, because, and in fact, you know, sometimes when I come back from countries, let me just tell you a quick story, and you can edit this, but just let me tell you a quick story. You know, I 3 years ago, my son, who was at the time in sixth form college, had always wanted to come on a trip with me, and so I decided to take him to northern Nigeria. Now, probably not in fact, it's the most dangerous place that I do go. I would rather go to Iraq than northern Nigeria, but anyway, my wife wasn't too keen on him joining me. It's funny, she never minds me going, but there you go. But he said, it's half term, Dad, I want to come with you. And we took him to a village where they'd had a massacre by the Fulani militia, and 22 people had been killed, we went into this, and the Fulani we knew were still in the fields around the village, but we went in there to be with them, to put our arms around them, to pray with them. And as we were coming out of the village, he said to me, "Dad," he said, "it should be compulsory for every British Christian to come to this village." Yeah. So I said, "Seth, why do you say that?" And he said, "Dad," he said, "these people have got nothing." He said, they're farmers, and they're frightened to go into their field to farm because they're being killed by the Fulani. He said, so they're beginning to starve. He said, you know, that they'd brought a boy in, actually, a 15-year-old boy that had a bullet in his leg that had been there for 3 months untreated and was septic. It was horrible, and because he couldn't get any treatment. And he said, "Dad," but he said, "when you prayed with them, I just saw the joy on their faces and the response." He said, "and we moan and complain in our churches about every little thing." He said, "but these people have, in many respects, got a right to complain, but they've got joy in their heart." And the answer to your question is that when you meet people like that, it makes you stronger in your faith than you've ever been. And I come back to this country sometimes and I go to church and I think, you know, we're just playing at being Christians. It kind of feels like that sometimes. But these people, and I could tell you story after story from all around the world, they are men and women of immense faith that just do something to you, you know, and you think, I've got to speak out for these people.
Daryl, if people want to get in touch with you, you're in Who's Who. They can email you, or if I give you a ring, find out more, how to get involved from the Trinity point of view. That'd be, I'm going to pray for you. Lord God, thank you for the vision that set up CSW 40 years ago. Thank you for the way you have led and guided and inspired. Thank you so much for the people they've been able to help over the years, and for the way they are still campaigning, still working to set up those fences that will protect people and will preserve freedom for those who are being persecuted. Lord, we just pray for Merv in this work. Ask that you will continue to lead him and guide him and the rest of the staff at CSW. And we pray here at Trinity that you will help us to play our part in that, in whatever way you are calling us to. In your name, amen.
Amen.